So, I've talked about this before, but it just seems still kind of weird, you know? I mean, honestly, it's so unusual to really look at it this way, but here's the thing. You have Tails and you have Shard. Now, Tails, we know, is going to finally debut, you know, full on screen and everything in the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie. We know that. Now, Shard, on the other hand, was a rebuilt Mecha Sonic, if you will, a rebuilt Mecha Pseudo Sonic, whatever you want to call it, who was made by Robotnik, Eggman, to take out Sonic, but saw the light. Was rebuilt to become the protector of Station Square, I should say, then was taken out, and then was rebuilt into the Shard character. However, when we got to the Mecha Sally arc, that's when things made a turn for the worse, apparently. Because I think one of the last stories had him basically being, you know, pretty much having the living hell, excuse my language, God, but having the living hell beat out of him by Metal Sonic, and basically left for dead. But the reason I bring up both Tails and Shard is, you know, just like with Tails, you know, being paired off with this one other character, so is Shard. And the character I'm talking about that both get paired off with, according to the fans, is Nicole. Now, some could understand and probably accept more of the fact that Shard and Nicole would be better off, since they're both pretty much AIs. They're not really flesh and blood, and they are pretty much immortal, if you know what I mean. And it makes sense, since, you know, the comic, to an extent, was teasing something between the two before the tragic situation in the comic involving Shard and Metal Sonic. Now, with that said, they also, well, not the comic, but fans through the comic and the way the characters were represented, and they kind of worked off each other at times, decided that Nicole would be better off with Tails. Now, what's interesting is the Tails and Nicole pairing actually precedes Nicole and Shard. And, you know, a lot of people always wonder, you know, why Tails would be paired up with Nicole. I mean, we know people pair him up with Zoe from Sonic Boom, Cosmo from Sonic X, you know, Amy Rose, you know, he gets paired up with an alternate female version of himself from an alternate world. He gets paired up with Fiona after she's redeemed. You know, things like that. We know they pair him up with a lot of characters, no matter what with many female characters, that is, no matter what the circumstance. But out of all those pairings, like I said in one video, in fact, I titled one video this, it seems that fans prefer Tails and Nicole above all. And I think, as I said in that video, and I've said before, the reason why they prefer Tails and Nicole over any other pairing Tails might have, or even any other pairing Nicole might have, is because I think it just, you know, it plays off the fact that, you know, Tails is like the little brother, the BFF, if you will, of Sonic, the best bud. And Nicole is kind of very similar to Nicole is very similar to Sally. Sally's like her, you know, sister, if you will, her big sister, and she's her BFF, and her best bud, if you will. And whether or not you want to believe what Ian says and all that, potential love interest in the post-soft retcon reboot of the Archie Sonic book. But be that as it may, that is potentially the only reason why Tails and Nicole get paired off. But when you look at Shard and Nicole, it's just as prominent. Well, I wouldn't say just as, but it's almost as prominent as Tails and Nicole. But if you take a look at a lot of pictures out there, as I've mentioned before, Tails and Nicole, pretty much dominate any other pairing Tails has, and pretty much dominates any other pairing Nicole has. But if you were to ask somebody who would they prefer between the two, who is the best pairing? Is it Shard and Nicole? Is it Tails and Nicole? And you'd probably have a very hold on for a second. You would have a very divisive, split, if you will, between the fan base. Because some fans would come out and say, Shard and Nicole. Because, like I mentioned earlier, both are, pretty much immortal. Both are not flesh and blood. Both computerized, AIs. So it makes sense. So a lot of people would go that route. But then again, some would actually, and if not more so, prefer Tails and Nicole. Because of the fact that both play the similar roles to the opposite, to their pretty much the big sibling. In this case, Sonic being like a big brother and Sally being like a big sister. And for my money, even though I can understand and see the logicness in Shard and Nicole as a pairing, especially with the fact that it was teased in the pre-Soft Retcon reboot during the Mecha Sally deal before that tragic situation. Even though I could see that, even though I could see the potential and the logicness and the fact that, like I mentioned, it was teased in the book before they pretty much killed Shard off, I actually have to prefer Tails and Nicole. And the reason being isn't because of the fact that Tails is, it's not the fact, well, hold on for a second. It isn't because of the fact that, like I said, both are kind of in a similar position when it comes to Sonic and Sally. It isn't because of that. It isn't because of the fact that Tails does deserve, in story, if you will, if you follow the Archie book and all that, some kind of happy ending. It's not just because of all that. It's not just because when they do get paired off somewhat in the books, they work kind of well off each other, when the time is presented. But it's because of the fact that, as Tails gets older, Nicole doesn't have to be. Nicole, like I mentioned with Shard, can be any age she needs to be for Tails. If Tails, gets old and gray, she can be old and gray. If Tails gets, lean and stalwart and everything as he gets older, she can maybe grow a few inches as well to match up with him. The point is, she can always be there for him even to the end. And with the technology, that's represented in the comic, if she wants to be with, Tails forever, and, Tails, pretty much being this way, if you will, not saying he totally is, but you can kind of sense it, I could see maybe a story being done, in the future by a fan, or maybe something official, whatever the case may be down the line, where we see a future of Tails allowing his brain to be downloaded onto a chip and everything, and he lives immortally in a computer, a Matrix-like thing with Nicole. I could see that, and it works out. It works out perfectly. Now, the same could be said for Shard, but again, like I said, the way they kind of represented his death, quote unquote, yeah, that'd probably be, beyond impossible. Like, his memories would probably have to be erased just to repair him. Not saying that would happen if they wanted to do it, but, again, I'm just, it just feels like it feels like Ian Flynn's like, hey, I got to have a major character death in this Mecha Sally arc. What can I do? Oh, I know. Instead of taking out Antoine, I'm going to take out Shard. And, that's what he did. That's what he did. But either way, I could see, that possibility being like the end result, for them to always be with Nicole and stuff. And again, I could see Tails in story, whether it's official or fan fiction, I could see him in a possible future allowing that to happen so he can be with her. Which is why a lot of people, like myself, do prefer it because, even though Shard and her are basically immortal and can go back and forth into the virtual world as much as, they want to right now, the Tails and Nicole one works out because, she could be any age she needs to be for him. He's young. He's like 12, 13, in canon. She could be 12, 13, or at least in that age range, be around his size, and there you go. She's got that capability, and like I said, he gets older, he gets into that 18, that 16 to 18 age range, becomes, ripped or built and stalwart. She can age herself back up to a regular 16 to 18 years old herself. And, like I said, as time goes on, and he gets older, she can age herself to be older. And then when that moment happens, if something like that was to happen or be written in a fanfic or maybe something official down the line, because we don't know what the future holds, I could see Tails being represented that way. Not, I could see it, not saying it would happen or will happen, but I could see something like that, being, representative of Tails, of if he falls for someone like Nicole, him coming up with, a way to have his mind, his memories, his brain downloaded into the system so he and Nicole can be together forever and also be able to, help out the future generations of freedom fighters and all that to, keep the planet safe and stuff. So I could totally see that happening, which is why when I look between the two, like I said, I understand the logicness and, the fact that it makes a lot more sense, between Shard and Nicole, both being AIs and all that. I can understand that, but since it looked like they tried to kill him off at the end, or towards the end of the pre-soft retcon, or the pre-soft reboot of the book, even though we all saw that happen, with the possibility that he may not come back, because that was always Ian Flynn's MO, that once he kills a character off, they're done, they're history, they're dead. Even though I would like the idea that they could bring him back, it just, looked like Ian said, nope, screw it, Shard's gone, goodbye. Again, like I said, if it wasn't for that and everything, but which unfortunately we did see that, like I said, I could see, Shard, I could see the sensibility with Shard and Nicole, but to me, since it was shipped and paired up and, created and supported by fans even before Shard and Nicole was that pairing, and it's one that I've supported since it was first, introduced, I have to go with Nicole and Tails, because again, I think it's because of the fact that when you look at, when you look at who they are pretty much BFFs with, it makes a lot of sense that you want to give Tails somebody who has a connection to his Aunt Sally, as he calls her, or his big sister Sally, whatever you want to call her. To him in the soft retcon reboot, you want to have him you want to give him someone that has a connection to her, and the best opportunity is, right then and there is Nicole, which makes a lot of sense. And again, you take a look at the possibilities in story with what they could do with Tails and Nicole, fan fiction wise or even officially wise. Again, we don't know what the future holds going forward, especially with the comics. I could see Tails being someone that if they decided to put him with Nicole officially, fan fiction wise or whatever, Archie Sonic Online wise or whatever, I could see Tails being the kind that would willingly Not saying this would happen, but, not saying Sega would allow it to happen either way. But I could see his character being one of those kind of characters that would be willingly, to allow their mind, their brain, to be downloaded into a system as they get older so that they could always be with the one they love. So I could see that. So honestly, between the two, my choice leans towards Tails and Nicole. Mostly, like I said, because of the fact of not just what I just mentioned, but as I mentioned earlier, her being an AI and being pretty much the BFF, like I was saying before the phone rang there, like I said, it leans towards Tails and Nicole, not only because it was one that came before or teased or brought together by the fans before, but mostly, like I said, what I just talked about, the fact that, I could see, Tails being written, in a way that, he would be willing to allow his mind to be downloaded as he got older into a chip so he could always be with Nicole. I could see that. But also the fact that not only is, like I say, Tails and Nicole similar with the fact of who, they are connected to from a BFF, big sibling kind of manner, but also the fact that Nicole pretty much could be any age that Tails needs. Tails, like I said, is represented as 12, 13, around that age range. She could be that way too. Be the same size, whatever. He gets older, she can go back to her regular size. You get the idea. So that's why it leans more towards that. It has more creative opportunities for his character, when it comes to a romance and everything. And it makes it unique. It makes it really unique because, again, she can, pretty much be any age he needs, he would need her to be, or she'd want to be for him, if you will. And like I said, when you look at a lot of the stories, you look at a lot of the fan art out there, and you compare a lot of the pairings of who people want Tails to be with, the number one female is always Nicole. It is. And I think it's because of everything I just mentioned, if not more. But who would you choose? Who do you think is better off? Better off being the better pair between the two? Is it Shard and Nicole, in your opinion? Or is it Tails and Nicole? Let me know in the comments below, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. I may have a poll up in that live chat. So check that out. Who do you prefer more, Shard and Nicole, or Tails and Nicole? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments in the live chat during the premiere. Also, check out the Teespring store in time for Christmas to see what kind of gifts you can get your family or friends or yourself. Also, check me out at BW Rose's Discussions on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Sorry about that, but like I said, check me out at BW Rose's Discussion on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. I am close to 300 podcasts, guys, and if you are listening on Anchor.fm, listener support has been enabled, so you can help support me there. And the video option for my podcast has also been opened up. So if you listen to my podcast on the various other services like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, you name it, you can not only listen to the audio version of the podcast, but you can also listen and watch the video podcast as well. Also check me out there. Also check me out at BW Roses on VENMO for content you can't get here on YouTube due to copyright reasons. Also check me out at BW Roses on Patreon to help support me there with the $1 or $3 tier. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. But again, guys, let me know what your choice is. A poll hopefully will be in the live chat for you guys to check out, but who do you choose? Is it Tails and Nicole or Shard and Nicole? Let me know down below, and I'm out.